Welcome, everybody. It is another wonderful fall Saturday, and we are in our second episode of our triggered series on mental health. We're specifically talking about anxiety today, and we have our panelists with us. We're going to be doing our best to not just talk at you, but talk with our panelists and talk to you, our YouTube audience. So you guys know her. She's been with us now for a couple of episodes. We have Amliv. How you doing, Amliv? And we have Natalia, who is a guest, first time on F.L.O.W. So I hope she brings all the energy, all the love, all the excitement. You know how we do it. So let's get started. Anxiety. I want to start off with some statistics on anxiety and see what you guys think about it. Here we go. Anxiety, right? It differs. There's many types of anxiety, differ by person and differ by type, but it can interfere with our daily living. You can have a specific anxiety disorder like agoraphobia or fear of trees, plants, animals, spaces, etc. You can have generalized anxiety disorder. You can have a panic attack disorder. You can have separation anxiety. But here's the numbers on it for everybody out there, right? Based on the National Institute of Mental Health, an estimated 19.1% of US adults had any type of anxiety disorder in the past year. This study was done in 2017. And also, 23.4% of those were female. So it's higher among females than it is male. And an estimated 31.1% of US adults experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their life. So those numbers sound cute, sound specific, may be relevant to you or not. But let me ask Natalia and Amliv, real talk, yeah. What's your experience with anxiety? Whoever feels comfortable to share.
I think I have a little bit of everything. One is I come from a background where I ran a residence hall. And so having students who exhibited their anxiety in a variety of different ways, I've had students where it's just just coming into my office and we're discussing it, as well as I've had students who have uncontrollably cried for an hour or had anxiety attacks, to that level where it's this uncontrollable crying, or just they are literally struggling to breathe, as well as I think everyone to a certain degree, we all have anxiety. It's our reaction to things in the environment, and it's how we choose to handle it. It essentially comes from a fight or flight situation. So, it's you feeling that stimulus in the environment and you reacting to it. So all of us in some way, shape, or form have experienced it, whether we want to call it anxiety or something else, but it's essentially that. Now, some of us have it to more extremes. Like I said, I've had students who uncontrollably cried, as well as it's that nervousness that you get, on a smaller stage when you're going to be in front of an audience and you're doing a public speaking event, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what I'm going to say, but how we choose to handle it. And for me, with my work in the residence hall, there were different aspects to that. I was on call on different nights. And so as much as I would go to sleep at night, it was knowing like my phone had to be on, it needed to be charged, because anything could happen in the middle of the night that I needed to go from being completely asleep to being awake and engaged and being able to make decisions, crisis decisions at a moment's notice. And so that was a little bit different for me, because you sleep a lot differently during that time.
Very true. I appreciate you sharing that, Natalia, talking about just the constant thought of what if.
Yes.
Based on your role, and then seeing it show up in a number of different ways for people during your time with residence halls. You said everything from crying uncontrollably, like not able to stop, to struggling to breathe, or maybe not crying for so long, but still showing some presentation in their physical reaction. Amliv, give me a little bit of your experience with anxiety, if at all.
So, so my experience is wide range from working in a independent residence for seniors and having to have to call the emergency line for someone to pick up a resident to go to the hospital because they fell, or some kind of emergency may have happened where they need to, we need to be on our toes at all times. Other instances where being in the military, you always have to be vigilant, and it's hard to turn off that vigilance, especially when you're overseas. Whether in a combat or non-combat zone, you still, it still is something that, every pin that drops, every little noise that gets made in the dark, you're always on edge because you need to be prepared or ready to either act on that fight flight. This is not a situation where you can freeze. And me personally, because of an MST situation, I had frozen in that situation. And for me, it spiraled me into the anxiety-ridden hypervigilance, insomnia, and all these other things that come with anxiety, but I didn't know what to call it at the time. So having mental health helped to unravel that, because the medical teams that I had, like doctors, would assume it was high blood pressure and were quick to give me blood pressure meds versus to think, hey, it could be a mental health issue. Let's check that out first. So that's my experience with anxiety.
Emily, you brought up two things that I'd love to talk with both of you as Black women here. But let me, one is about your personal experiences as a person of color and maybe how people perceive these things with others, maybe yourself. And then also though, the symptoms. I'm gonna read off to you guys the symptoms of just generalized anxiety. Just in general, this is how you feel, all right? Feeling restless, wound up, or on edge. Being easily fatigued. Having difficulty concentrating, your mind goes blank. Being irritable. Having muscle tensions. Difficulty controlling your feelings of worry. Having sleep problems such as difficulty or falling or staying asleep. Restlessness or unsatisfying sleep. Does that sound like anybody else's Tuesday? Or just matter of fact, let me be honest. Does that sound like anybody else's Sunday before the work week?
Yes.
What do you guys, just hearing those lists of signs and symptoms, does anything come up for you guys?
I mean, for me personally, it goes back to what I experienced working for the residence hall. And it was a lot of that. Like I said, being on call and not knowing what was going to happen at a moment's notice. I mean, I can go from it's a really good day, everything is fine, we got everything taken care of, to, a student has been involved in a car accident. We don't know the full extent of it. Now having to respond, to make that phone call to a parent or to call the higher ups to say, hey, this is what's happened. This is the information we have. Because for a parent, this is their baby, this is their heart outside. And so that, like, trying to make sure you say the right words to keep them calm, but still informed, and being ready for that kickback of whatever is said. But even for me on my day to day, you're navigating this. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or in the middle, 2 o'clock in the morning. And even now, there's some of it now that I've stepped away from that life. There's still some of that still's with me. I mean, I'll go to sleep and still wake up in the middle of the night, like, wait, is my phone charged? And it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore. That's long gone. But like I said before, all of us have it in different ways. It's how we choose to handle it. It's that interest for a new job. Like for me, transitioning from, though I chose to walk away from that work, transitioning from, I knew what my day-to-day was going to be in a general sense, to now, like, wait, I have a regular life. I have a regular job that when I leave, my phone doesn't have to ring. It was a whole change of life for me. And for everyone, 2020 has been a year. My 2020 started a bit early in 2019 when I decided to leave my job, and then having my grandfather pass away, who's who had just turned 95. And that was like, wait, I don't know what life is like without him there, because he's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many other changes that happened after in the last year that I think for everyone, it's been like, we're trying to catch our breath. Like just when you've gotten used to something else pops up. So.
That is so very true. You mentioned things inside there that causes anxiety for most young adults. Our audience transition from work, right? You go from, and people do not prep you well enough for this. Let me be transparent. Like you go from dad, mom, parent, caregiver, auntie, uncle, do this, do this, do that, do this. Even in college, there's some level of direction from your professors, even though they pull back a little bit. But then you hit the world. And I mean, it's like getting hit with cold water early in the morning. And how do you navigate that? Or even changing jobs that don't have the same degree of responsibility to a new one. And then let's not even talk about the loss of life.
It was, for me, it was really a whole lifestyle change for me because, besides being on call at nights, there were being on call on the weekends. And so changing my time frame to go, okay, well, I'm on call this weekend. So that means I'm not going to go further than 10 to 15 minutes away from the university, because if something happens, I need to be able to respond and be alert. It's making sure my phone is always charged, to now having my weekends and going, wait, I can, I can hang out with friends more. And not to say that I couldn't before, but it's just that there was this always in the back of my head, like, hey, your phone needs to be charged just in case. Where now, if I left it at home, it's not the end of the world. That lifestyle change, or just being able to speak to my family differently, or going, oh, I can go away this weekend. I don't have to check if I'm on call this weekend before going. And you mentioned, or I mentioned about having someone pass too, and knowing that they're not there in the way they were before, and going, wow. There's a paper, I can't remember what it's called, and it literally lists, if you've had these things happen in the space of a year, then you're more likely to be under stress and have these different things. And one is like a loss of job, or changing job, and then I moved on top of it, in addition to losing a loved one. There's so many different things, but moving in general is also its own thing that comes with it. So there are a lot of different things that we come across, and it's how do we navigate those to cut down on the stress, and finding different ways that are going to make it pleasant, and not necessarily, I know for me, I've learned trying not to make a long to-do list, because, it's like, oh my gosh, I have this to do, versus you go, okay, yes, I make a list, but I'm choosing 3 things to do today. It doesn't always work out that way because I stray, but when I'm able to come back, those are some of the things I go, it's not all going to get done. It's not all going to be perfect. And this is still something that I'm working on, because there are aspects of my life that it's like, okay, this does not look anywhere near what it should. So.
Let's hold on to some of those things. We're definitely going to talk about how we handle and manage it. But you've talked about loss, you talk about job and life transitions. Amliv, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it as well, because again, read off these basically descriptions, and let me read it for anyone who's just joining us. This is the signs and symptoms of just generalized anxiety disorder, right? Just in general, nothing specific. Feeling restless, wound up, or on edge, being easily fatigued, having difficulty concentrating, being irritable, muscle tension, difficulty controlling your feelings of worry, and having sleep problems, which can be anything from you feel like you can't sleep for a full long time, you have trouble staying asleep, you feel like you're restless, but you can't get to sleep. All these different things are signs and symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder. So Amliv, what kind of comes up for you?
That's the life of a soldier, an active duty soldier right there. And we may look calm on the outside, but the internal is what really gets us that the doc, like when I went to for checkups, every time something came up of those symptoms for me, and I'd go for a checkup, check my blood pressure, they're like, oh no, this is way too high. Like, you shouldn't even be walking, talking, none of this stuff. And I'm like, just give me a minute, let me just calm down, and then I'll, check it again. And then they call it a phantom reading.
Okay.
So to me, said so much in what she just said about transition in life, because even transitioning from the military active duty to civilian life, people would think just walking up behind you or dropping something that's normal for them, but for me it's a whole different trigger, and then the other stresses of life that come along with it, not just deaths, not just sleep problems, not just they add on to the anxiety as well, and the worry, and it's hard to cope. And yes, to-do lists are a great thing, but definitely nap times were my savior, not just in college, but in as a soldier, but even in transition, where I tell people you have to take naps. Naps do help, because sometimes whenever you're that right, right, as adults we need it. We need to add it, right, because it does help reduce stress, and it helps to restart the day when you're having an anxiety ridden day, that you need to just take a break and do a self check-in, and just take a quick nap, and then when you wake up refreshed, you're like, okay, now I can focus on whatever task is at hand left to do for the day.
Wow. Let me bring in a little bit of my background, and I'm going to be speaking kind of interchanging with being myself wholly as a young adult, young person, but also as a therapist. Change gets us all. I think that's one of the things that we sometimes really lose sight of, how quickly change can get us. And it's interesting because it's such a natural part of life, but we are so conditioned to create routines to weed out change. But then you hit this period of your life where, depending on how you experience it, it's just going to happen. And that 25 to 35 period of your life, I'll even push it back, right? Let's even say 21 to 35 time frame of your life is one that is fraught with change. You go from being looked at as a child to all of a sudden being an adult. You go from a 8-hour day with breaks in between and lunch and gym to now working a full-time job with responsibilities. You go from possibly being single to dating. You go from maybe not even really caring about establishing a partner, exclusive partner, to thinking about that. Then you have that with work. Then you have finding your own place. Now, as 2020, keep it real, not many of us are trying to find our own place because it costs a lot and we got bills to pay. So there's another change. And then there's like, if you happen to get married, if you go from living by yourself, if you were so lucky, to living with somebody else, like, come on, right? There's a host of different changes inside that. But wait, I'm not done yet, right? So now you got those changes. And then if you're at the part of your life where you're looking to have a child, you have to include that into the mix. Yes. And so now I go back to that list, and you tell me who's not feeling restless, who's not easily fatigued, who doesn't have difficulty concentrating, who don't feel a little irritable or have muscle tension. Like, these are things that experience us. And AmLive, I want to highlight this for any of our viewers watching. It's so easy for those things to be misdiagnosed. It's so easy for those things to be kind of characterized as, oh, your muscle tension is just from the gym. Nah, dog, I didn't even work on my neck, and my neck is tight, right? Like, yes. I don't even work on that muscle. Why is it tight? Or you always asking somebody what's up, and they just biting at your head. Like, is it? I feel like it's me, but really want to say it's you. Mm-hmm. And these things are easily dismissed as somebody just being rude. Nope, they're probably anxious. Somebody maybe being aloof or like kind of separated from their peer groups, but really it could be anxiousness, it could be anxiety, and all around change. So let me kind of just speak specifically about that. How do you guys feel about, that's too general. What are some of the little changes that get you guys? Maybe connect with somebody out there. And I'll read this because at Victoria Carbone Will said that one of her anxious triggers is the new things, new people, new places, right? Those are changes. So I believe you guys may have shared it before our audience. What's like a change that you're just like, nope, if I see that coming or if that comes up, all the things are happening in me. So many to pull from.
So many to choose from.
I'll share one. I'll kick it off. Give you guys some time to think. So I am typically not an anxious person. I want to preface that to make me seem cool and strong and manly. Um, Yet I find that that is not true in all areas, because as I think about fatherhood and the process of becoming a father and all that that entails, I actually found myself being a little daggone worried. Like, thinking about it more often than I should, trying to go down this rabbit hole of, well, what happens if this happens? What happens that one? How do we go from there? How do we go from that? Um, and I got to be honest with y'all, it's one of the few times that like I'm really concerned. Like I'm really thinking about it now. I'm a part of a group of men, but let me just stick to the answer. Mine is fatherhood. That's a change that I am actually now feeling a little anxious about. That's mine. I showed my cards.
I'm gonna say, there's a lot of changes that happened in my life in 2016. 2013 to 2016. It was, I think one was motherhood, but then the loss of a child. Then it was divorce. And then it was, huh?
I said one. Now you showing off. Shoot.
Okay.
Two. This just the first one of those. I'd be gone left.
Yes.
Wow.
That was.
But it just, as Natalia said earlier, it's like one thing that compounds another thing that compounds another thing. So it's like once one thing happens and you didn't even get to heal or grieve the loss of that one thing, then the next things happen. Right.
Oh, hold on, Natalia. Before I answer, we got to talk about that, right? I would be remiss not to talk about one of the things that's difficulty with anxiety and change is how we resolve our feelings about a particular change or a thing or a trigger from the past before moving into the next one. And I want to put that out there because we're going to talk about that. How do we resolve things that trigger our anxiety and things that we've made us feel anxious in the past before moving on to things in the future? Go ahead, Natalia. I'm going to hold on to that.
Wow. For me, it's almost like a table. Like, what do you want to pick from in regards to what's caused it? Because it's been a year, like I said. One for me, and we've kind of all touched on it, that transition of, being a parent, and or for me, it's really settling my life with someone. Though I have dated, am dating, so on and so forth, the concept of me being solely with one person, like this is forever, and sharing my home, all those different dynamics. I've navigated this world kind of, just by myself, in the sense of when I'm going to parties, when I'm going to events, it's, oh, Natalia's here. And so the thought of sharing that space with someone and going, can they fit into my life? Can I fit into theirs, has brought its own list of things for me. Because it's like, wait, how does this work? I've had these friends for how many years? Are they going to like them? Is he going to like them? Or is it going to be a thing? Are they not going to want to come to the house? There are all these different things I've done because, like I said, I've navigated a lot of my life just by myself, and not necessarily having someone with me at all times. So it's like, how does this play out? How does the world accept us as a couple? So
that those two. So Amliv dropped the heavy bomb of loss of child and loss of relationship. Earlier Amliv mentioned transitioning from a high stress job to a not military, and then you drop the things that we kind of want to say we're hopeful for, like who doesn't want to get in a relationship, right? Who doesn't want to spend their life with somebody, until you start thinking about the specifics and you're like, maybe not so much. Because like what you said, Natalia, is so real. Like you go from, being responsible for you, particularly as a young adult. Like if you are dating later into the young adult span of life, you are more independent. Like no one really dictates what you do, or how you do it. And so now you have someone that you got to think about, like, nah, chief, I'm out. Like really, it's not the best thing to do. So you got to consider that. Like at SS on YouTube, right? Actually share something. Arguments with his spouse are anxious.
Yes.
Like think about even the two major periods of this. Like if you're dating someone seriously, then every argument is like, is this maybe this is the reason that we shouldn't. No, do we go? I don't know. And if you're married to the person, then it's like, well, how do we handle this conversation? How do we address this? And so now you're anxious because you're thinking about, well, if we don't settle the argument, how are we going to move around the house, right? Or how are they going to respond to this? Or will this be a long argument or will it be a short argument, right? Am I right or am I wrong? I'm definitely right. She's always wrong. Like these are all things. See how I threw it in there, real sly.
At your head, I feel like there's gonna be a shoe across the
Nah.
screen.
I'm good. Because I'm always right. I'm always
Right.
We all don't believe this. I know you guys don't believe it. It's cool. But like these are the things that it's like we are experiencing on a day-to-day. And I want to just really put out there for our audience as we talk about this. Like we want to elevate your consciousness to be mindful. Like if you find yourself struggling to engage in things, right? If you find that you're avoiding something more consistently, you're avoiding the argument, you're avoiding hanging with the friend, right? Getting up to go to work actually has you wanting to hit the snooze button 6 times instead of 2, right? Or you're not sleeping on Sundays going in. Like these are all signs of maybe considering something else is going on that you might be anxious. I'll throw in as a point of kind of information. I'm reading a wonderful book, The Body Keeps Score. A wonderful book. If you're a clinician, you want to be a clinician, absolute wonderful read. And I'll try to condense this. The reality is our bodies hold stock of all the information and things that we receive. And really, Amliff talked about it. When you're anxious, there is a heightened awareness of self about something around you that has alerted you. Mm-hmm. Typically, your body is meant to like take in that information, assess, and if it's cool, you get back down. Well, military persons and other persons in the high-stakes jobs, because they're constantly taking in that information, it's like their brains get stuck in high alert. So now you got adrenaline pumping through, right? You got all this energy and information in there, and you're just like, what's happening? I don't know. And so everything you're astutely and acutely aware of. You can't sleep because your brain is thinking there's a potential threat or danger or something to be mindful of, and this impacts your body. You shouldn't have that level of stress being exerted on your body continually. It's meant to go up and come back down. And so I want to put out there for those, if you feel like this is you, please take stock of it because you might be anxious. Like you might be suffering with anxiety because you know what the next step is, y'all? It's a panic attack. So for those out there in our audience, how many of you have experienced a panic attack? Because the panic attack is your body's way of saying, no, we can't do this, dog. Nope, too much. Right? The panic attack is like the refresh screen on a frozen computer is just spinning. And you're trying to hit everything to get it to stop, but it's spinning. So I'd love for people in the chat to let us know if you've experienced a panic attack. And I want to ask Natalia and Amliv, have you experienced one or have you seen somebody go through one? And what was that like for you either to experience it or see someone experience it?
I haven't experienced it in the sense of, those obvious signs, mm-hmm. But other things like I'm like I go back to running the residence hall, but there were things that when I got on the university's campus, my eyes were alerted. It's like, hey, are all the lights on around the building? Because I want to make sure my students can egress from the building properly, as well as our cameras are working. It's, is there trash anywhere? And even for my students, it's like, wait, that student isn't walking like they usually would, or I've noticed there's been a change in their pattern. So there's this consciousness, even with my staff, because I was looking out for them because of the level of work that they did. Like, do I need to send them to counseling? Do they need some time off that they're trying not to push? Have they overloaded themselves? And then even for seeing, it was with my students, one in particular at my last year, it was, I want to say my last year, she had 2 that I saw, actually 3. But she had others on campus where, university personnel, like uncontrollable sobbing. She could not stop. I don't know. The first one that I saw, I don't know what necessarily triggered her. But literally we had to call for her counselor to talk with her and then eventually to take her to counseling service to, discuss whatever the issue is. And then at one point in time, this person was in my office and because I was choosing a particular disciplinary method, they got extremely stressed about it, and literally went from talking to me this way to, no, I really don't want to, like, can you take this off? Like, oh my God, and it was just like, it was this deep breathing. I was like, okay, let's just do this. Let's just take a moment. We'll forget about the disciplinary measure. Um, for me, I just put on something on YouTube just to play, like, hey, we'll just sit here, you take your time and kind of talk through it a little bit. And then it was just like, we'll just sit. We're not discussing it, because at this point in time, you're not in a space to really have a healthy conversation about it. That was my last time, but my first time was in the middle of the night where the students' roommates called because they're like, Dean, we don't know what's going on. And literally it was just this uncontrollable hyperventilating. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Do you need meds? Because we don't get that knowledge necessarily. So it's like, hey, are you supposed to be on meds for something else? Is this something you're familiar with? While this person is still like, and so it's like, all right, do we need to call the ambulance? And what are some of the different aspects we need to do? So it can be extremely, I think for me, it was my first time seeing it was extremely scary because I didn't know what I needed to do for that person. At the time, I was a resident assistant and not in charge of the residence. So, very different scenario, but it was just like, wait, I've never seen this before. And in your head, I think you see one of those videos where it's like, oh, get a brown paper bag and maybe breathe in again. So that does not work. That is not the best thing ever. But people, when they see that, they think, oh, maybe you need to breathe in the bag. It's like, no, that's not the case. But trying to find different ways to take whatever stimulus was in the air for them away so that they could get calmer and being able to talk about whatever it is we can do in order for it to be beneficial. So.
Liv, I definitely want you to go, but I want to make sure our YouTube audience knows that we are always aware of the conversation happening in the chat. Some people have shared that they have had panic attacks. At Victoria Carbone Will says, like, one time and it was awful. Erin Stewartson says, you just kind of feel helpless, right? She says, as watching somebody go through a panic attack and not being able to help them. I think, Natalia, you were talking about that. Catherine says she feels physically sick. And, it's as a result of the school, the week-long election, personal things happening all at once. These are all things that they've experienced. Liv, please share a little bit about your experience with panic attacks personally or from others.
For me, it was more personal because I've had family members that told me about their panic attacks before, but I didn't experience it till I was on active duty in Kuwait, as I said before. And I think I had what triggered was a nightmare, and I woke up just crying uncontrollably.
Wow.
And I couldn't stop. And I think I woke up in the middle of the night and I still had to get to work early in the morning. So I kept trying to calm myself down to go back to sleep because I had to, do PT in the morning. And, I'm like, I'm losing sleep because I'm not, I can't stop. Like, what is going on? But anyways, the next ones were stateside in Maryland. I was still active duty again. And between tools dropping made my heart feel like it's about to pop out of my chest. And to the last one that really was the straw that, guided me into my medical retirement was, I think a soldier had one of my, the soldiers that I was with walked into a room. They were having a meeting with some upper echelons, and the way they mistreated or handled him just triggered me off. And I just busted out crying, couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't catch my breath. My heart was popping out of my chest. I couldn't speak. So I was just like to them, I'm done. I need to change out these clothes because I can't, I feel like I'm stifling. And, it took me almost an hour and a half to get calm and then to go see a chaplain to then be able to make sense or make words out of what was happening, because I just, figured I could be having an asthma attack. I have asthma, I didn't have time to grab for my inhaler, and even that wouldn't help. So I was just like, okay, this is something worse than an asthma attack. So it was crazy.
Wow, I appreciate you both sharing those experiences. And again, I'm going to take the opportunity to provide some things to our audience and to you as well. The first thing is the panic attack for a person feels absolutely real to them. Right now, I want to kind of allude to if production can get the panic signs of a panic attack up, and share that with the audience. Heart palpitations, right? Your heart is beating out of your chest. You find yourself sweating. You are trembling or shaking. You are having difficulty breathing. You feel like you're going to choke. You feel like the world is going to end right now. It's happening. Like there's no way to stop it. And generally feeling out of control. Those any kind of like three combinations of those is a good sign of a panic attack. And really, what I want to tell all of our audiences as partners first, as people who are around it, like Natalia, you were, one of the best things to do is just to regulate your own breathing. Like that sounds so crazy. Like lock eyes with the person, enter into their space, and just slow your breathing, exaggerate it down, like exaggerate it tremendously, and slow it down. Our brains are so awesome. There's things called mirror neurons, and that's the thing that connects with other people and allows us to empathize. And so by you slowing yourself down, you immediately begin to regulate the space around you. So I want to give everyone that really simple trick of slowing people down. And then there's some other things that I would suggest. Like if you have permission to touch, it could be hold the person and kind of like their hands, right? Gentle pulses, and just while you're breathing and you're holding them, again, connection, because sometimes these things happen and we feel so separate. Now, again, that is with permission, because for some, that may not be appropriate depending on what the panic attack is related to. And some more specific techniques is getting people to do really stupid, simple things. Let's count the tiles on the window, right? Let's count the flower leaves. It's usually like, let's just count randomly. And sometimes that seems really hard to do. I can't count. Right. And it could be getting them to look at something else. So we do this with kids all the time. We call it cognitive distractions. Like, I mean, I've talked about stupid stuff, like ridiculous things. Kids in a full blown anxiety provoked like panic attack. And I'm like, yo, that painting is crooked. What? It's like, I don't know. So speaking to the person that is support, right, in the presence of someone experiencing panic attack, those are really simple things that you can do to help someone. And then the person going through panic attack, always so difficult because again, everything feels real. I always say, smell the pizza. Yeah, smell the pizza. I forget. That was said by Victoria Carbone on the chat. One of the things that I always recommend for those going through it is start to just feel the things around you, like ground yourself literally, like wiggle your toes, right? Try to describe the texture of something that you're holding. What is it that you're smelling, right? Go literally work through your senses to bring you back into the moment. Because here's another point of information for our audience and for you guys. One of the crazy thing about anxiety is it either tethers, it mostly tethers you to something that happened to the past or has you trapped about something in the future. And I tell all my clients about this. Anxiety has you time traveling all the time. Anxiety has you time traveling. You're basically, this happened to me in the past. It made me feel this way. So I need to prepare for everything in the future while you're trying to manage all the stuff of the present. Well, I don't know about you. That's really exhausting, right? You're trying to avoid the feeling that you felt in the past. So therefore it's still actively happening in you. You remember the way, Amliv, I actually won't do details, but let me do something else randomly. Gosh, all of these things could be triggering. So sensitive moment, this could be triggering, the example that I want to use. But for the person that was like beat, right? You are remembering the feel of the belt on you. You're remembering the sound it made when it came through the air, right? You're remembering the face that they look. And so that's actively happening. And so you're trying to avoid the thing that looks like it in the future while you're still trying to manage the feeling in the present. And so that's why it's so important to just ground yourself in the moment, right? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? Like count things that you see, smell. What can you smell around you? What does it taste like? These are all simple ways to help ground you in the moment, because it's so real for us. And talking about the body keeping score, with you guys, again, reading this book, The Body Keeping Score, wonderful book. I was amazed at how these experiences shape us. Like, here's something that we don't realize. Anxiety is, in my opinion, often triggered by trauma. Now, how I use that word trauma is that it's not always the military level trauma or the unfortunate rape victim trauma or things like that. Trauma just means something happening that was significant to you to alter your brain chemistry, to alter how you experience the world in that moment. Sometimes it's traumatic for a kid to see their parents yelling at each other. If they go from never seeing it and seeing it, that's trauma for them. And now here's the crazy thing about trauma. It gets us to get into that, as they call that, brainstem thinking. I don't like the word that they use because it's very evolutionary, but I'll say brainstem thinking. It gets you to think based on emotions and feeling. Your body's preparing for something to happen. But here's the thing, because that brain is thinking, the logical brain shuts off.
Right.
And the logical brain is what links things to times and periods. It allows you to know, like, oh, this is today, right? And this is happening now. But the brainstem doesn't think like that. It just feels.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things happen that cause that to be hyper alert, then yeah, as soon as you smell the scent of, whatever, right back there.
But Rob, remember this, that the reason why it does that is because it goes back to when we were born and we had no words to speak or anything. That's where we regulated us or signal to our attachment, like our parents or our caregivers, that we needed something, that
Mhm.
something was wrong. This is our alarm system. I need help.
Mhm.
Whether I'm hungry, I need to be changed, I need to be held, and the older we get as adults is that we forget. And I think our brains are trying to trigger us back to, the, I guess the word instinct of what we were initially programmed as at birth to go back to. And in that sense, I could agree with you that, the body does keep score, especially the right hemisphere of our brains. It keeps a memory of something that happened to us. And for me, when the trauma in Kuwait happened, it brought me back to being 4 years old of something that happened to me as a toddler. And I couldn't understand, why is it bringing me back to when I was 4 years old, feeling those feelings as I do right now as a 27-year-old, So it does keep tabs on you to say that, hey, this happened before, and this is what we did, and this is what we're going to do to retreat and protect ourselves,
So true. So very true. Natalia, I saw you nodding your head emphatically at different things. I don't want to leave you out the conversation, so please feel free to share any thought that came up.
The fact that you mentioned about the body keeping score of things, and even just like, feeling that neck pain. I know for me, there are certain things that I knew it had reached a certain level, because if my stress level, the trying to make those right decisions, as I have to go back to my assistant director position, you're dealing with different students from different backgrounds and families. And as wanting to be somewhat of a people pleaser, like let everyone walk away from the table with something, there are times it just built up in my body between lack of sleep and being the constant aware. There are times I could not turn my neck because it was just that that tightness in my shoulders, in my neck. And I would have to find different ways to get away in order to bring myself back. And I'd wonder why. And in addition to, like you mentioned about the trauma, it doesn't have to be the big T that we typically think of. It's just those things that made us go, wait, life is very different from before. And even just us going back to 2020, all of us have experienced some level of difference where, okay, now we're having to wear masks going into places that we didn't have to, or not being able to engage with our family members in different ways because we might hurt them if we're not checking ourselves. So just those things specifically, our bodies remembering those traumas, those are things that hit me as I'm navigating my own transitions that we're talking about now, that I've realized for myself, like, hey, this is definitely something that my body's showing me, like, we have to step aside. Why are you not able to fulfill this task when you could have done this and so many other things in a day, and now you have more time, but you're just kind of like, right now, just being a little bit more open. I'm currently in school and I'm working on some things. With that being said, because I tried some aspect of school before, And now that I have the time, it's like, wait, why am I not pushing through as much as I should? But it's because of all the things that happened at that time that now I'm like, I thought this should be an easy breeze because I've taken away a lot of those obstacles that I had before. But instead, it's almost like I'm back at that point that I was when I was trying to finish this. So now it's like, okay, Lord, how, you know, how to go through this and finding someone to help go, what's triggering you in this way? What are some small steps that you need to do so that you're not back at the spot and you can overcome this obstacle?
Natalia, I appreciate both you and Amleth sharing the things that you did. And I want to use that as a launching point to talk about how important it is for us to become aware of ourselves.
Yes.
But before getting to that, if I can pivot, this year has been a lot.
Yes.
Right? But this really and truly, and what you talked about, I want to connect these two thoughts as you did, this idea of becoming aware of how you're feeling and taking the time to take stock of that, which as
Mhm.
Americans, we have not. Like, let me keep it real. At least I feel that I am in this way. I think a lot of Americans were triggered by the amount of time they had. You just outlined it because we're so used to moving from this to
Mhm.
that, to that, to that, that when you were given time to slow down, you didn't know what to do with it. And here's the other thing for many of us, because we utilize the busyness of the world,
Yes.
right, to manage our own anxieties.
Yes.
I don't have to worry about X thing if I have something else to do. Like, I don't have to worry about this other area of my life because there's work, right? After I come home from work, we eat and we go to sleep. I don't got to talk to you, right? I can talk to you with a, hey, how's the day? But I don't have to address the issue that's there.
Correct.
Or, if I was in a mediocre job, but now we're home and I'm thinking to myself, like, I actually have all the time in the world to do resume building. Like, I honestly could be writing my resume and sending it out to everyone.
Yes.
All of these different things happen because we were slowed down. And this year has really opened a lot of people up to feeling anxious.
Mhm.
Jessica Taylor says, so true. Victoria at Carver and Wells says, being home with my people has actually brought it to a screeching halt. Oh, talking about being a safe place. Oh, Victoria says that being home has been safe, made her feel safe. Actually, interesting because I think for so many others, it has been the exact opposite. Seeing everyone so frequently, so often. And I really want to outline for so many people who are watching this and who will go back and watch it, like, it's okay to say this year has been a lot. Like, it's okay to realize that you've been having trouble engaging in work because maybe your favorite athlete died this year, or your favorite actor died
Mhm.
this year, or you weren't able to see friends as accessibly as you may have wanted to, right? Or the thing that actually helped keep you spiritually grounded was cut off from you for church for so many people.
Mhm.
Or you experienced a death close to you because of somebody stricken by the pandemic, or somebody who is a frontline worker and you see the stress that they are experiencing and you can't say anything about it, or the fact that you've just seen the same walls and you're trying to figure out if it's Tuesday or Friday, like you just don't know. This year has been so much. And as we go into the holidays, I really want to highlight for so many people the importance of taking stock, until you said it, taking stock of yourself.
Me
Like,
too.
being aware of, like, yeah, no, today ain't the day. Mm-mm. It's not.
It's just,
It's not at all. And that's one of the things that I hope people watching can hold on to. Is just like the first thing you can really do is just become aware of yourself, as uncomfortable as that is. So
uh,
go ahead.
no, literally you mentioning how uncomfortable it is, that is
Mm,
one of the biggest things I think for everyone for 2020, whether it's, you're going to have someone else in your life say, hey, I've noticed that this is something that you've done and you do frequently, and addressing that, as well as even just for yourself, like, wait, this is really who I am. This is something that I've done. I had that experience a couple months before, like the month before 2020 happened. Some good, some not so good. Some things that you have to know where you start and where someone else begins, because realizing that sometimes people can put their own things on you,
okay.
but
Right.
being able to sit in that space for me and go, okay, was this person talking really about me or themselves? Taking ownership of my own stuff to go, yeah, that's right. Or no, this isn't me. This is something that you have. And that awareness is absolutely crucial, as you mentioned, because it helps you to go for, like, okay, well, this seems to be an across the board. It's not just here, this one person in my life. It's these others are saying it as well. So there's some truth to it. And then, you know, being able to look at yourself like, is this how I see myself? What are my intentions behind it? And how can I address it? And finding those, if that's something you choose to, or just accepting it, first of all. But the acceptance is sometimes the hard part with it. For me, it was realizing, you know, you touched on how 2020, we kept ourselves so busy. That was something that I really realized when I resigned from my job, because it kept me so busy. There are different aspects of my life that I just didn't have to.
Oh, here we go.
It's a,
no, talk about it. Like, for real, talk about it. It's real.
It's the truth. I'll be honest, to a certain degree, my dating life, and taking care, I mean, bills were paid, don't get me wrong, but really and truly focusing like, okay, we have this much set aside for investments, we need to be more crucial with it. Well, you know, we're this age, these are things that haven't been taken care of, and you say you want it, but have you really looked at it? You know, you say you want these goals, but you've been, you know, essentially just getting up and going to work. So what do you need to do differently? For me, like I said, that kind of started 2020, which is why I decided to resign from my job. But once I did, it's like, okay, so now you don't have an excuse. You can't say it's because you came back home at 5 o'clock in the morning after dealing with something and you need to sleep. No, you have a regular time to go to bed now. So why can't you get up and go exercise? Or why can't you start on that hobby? Or why can't you focus more time on reading on this particular issue in order to be better? Or why can't, you know, all these, whatever your goals are, now you're faced with, do you really want it as much as you say you want it? Or are you just saying that? Or, and not only that, but what is the reason behind it? Because it's one thing like, okay, I'm not going after it, but now it's, okay, so you say you want to, let's just for argument's sake, you say you want to get married. Well, what are the steps that you're taking towards that? You know,
who wants to ask those hard questions though? Really? Come on, let's be honest about it.
Who does? You know, what didn't make your relationships work before? Or, you know,
J.Lo, just
but all these different questions that are very, when you have to face yourself, it can be pretty hard when you look in the mirror and go, oh, maybe it's, you know, some things are just that, like, yes, because of work, but are you using work, or are you using the kids, or are you using whatever it is to substitute in that time for really focusing on those things that you need to take care of? Because you'll always find something, you know, like, you know, I need to go cook, you know, the house needs to be cleaned right about now, which, don't get me wrong, all very important things, you know, oh, I need to talk to my mom, I need to talk to my best friend, I need to do the, yeah, but those other things that you really need to focus on, it's hard.
Natalia is taking the flow space to its max. Everyone out there will be going to the overflow in 5 minutes, and we'll just drop the link in the chat. You feel free to join us live. But Amliv, you were shaking your head, so you got a little time before we go to overflow. What were your thoughts?
Oh no, I agree because you know, it's called an excuse. We make excuses to avoid the things we really need to be doing. And 2020, to me, it was the best year because it gave me a cushion to actually catch my breath. Because you know what, since I left the military in 2018, I felt like I couldn't catch my breath fast enough. I didn't have enough time to think about what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, how I wanted to live my life, and everything just irritated me. Like, even if I was on meds, it was still irritating me, you know? So even though I made plans in 2020 and I thought it would have been messed up, I was like, you know what, let me reroute. Instead of getting mad at the changes, I was like, let me reroute my changes, right? And when I did that, I saw that I did hit my goals of paying off all my debt, of, you know, getting rid of student loans, getting back in school, you know, getting enough rest, getting all the nap time I needed when I wasn't working, and being paid while not working. So I was like, you know what, I'm living a good life. You know, who wouldn't want that? So that's what I'm saying. 2020 was not, it started out where I could have said it was bad, but then I see the blessings in disguise happening, and I have to thank God for it, because it's like, I couldn't have done that on my own.
We have 4 minutes, and I want to kind of bridge the gap between the both of you, because I think I in my deep brain, I'm one of those people, but I try to be mindful of that because what Natalia said is so true. This year allowed a lot of people to look at self, and it wasn't always a pretty image being reflected back. And that's either self specifically or the self around, like your environment, your atmosphere. Like, this is what I'm living in, this is what I'm dealing with, and the anxiety that that produces, because now you have questions about what do I do, and then there are potential unknowns that come up from that, and that can be a lot for a lot of people. And I want to really just honor that for so many of us, because as Natalia was saying, to sit with yourself and to ask yourself those questions are not always the easiest things to do, and it's uncomfortable. And there's a lie that I want to debunk for a lot of people right now when it comes to mental health. Like, if you see me or any other therapist, I hope you're not coming for a comfortable experience, because that's not my job. My job is not to help you. My job is to get you to a place of being comfortable with uncomfortable, but it's not going to be a comfortable process. So let me keep it honest with you. And sometimes I think we're so desirous of just being comfortable that we avoid those uncomfortable places and spaces and situations and mindsets that really propel us into growth, like propel us to the next place, because that small gap, sometimes large, of uncomfortability we just don't want to sit with. Yet, here's the irony of that statement for everyone out there watching. You're also not comfortable where you are. So you don't want to deal with the uncomfortable spaces to prep you for change, but you're also currently not uncomfortable. All you've really decided is that this uncomfortable is something I'm used to, so I'll stick with it. And that's so difficult. So what we're gonna do, Amliv and Natalia, is that we're gonna drop the link in the chat, and we're gonna give people an opportunity to join us here as we talk for about 15 more minutes. If people join, great. If they don't, we'll just continue to have the conversation as we have been. But to our audience, as you guys know, F.L.O.W is all about making sure that everyone has an opportunity to share their voice. So you'll see the link in the chat as it comes up. Feel free to join us, share your thoughts, your comments, ask a question, your experience. We'd love to hear from you before we wrap up our show today on triggered and anxiety. So yeah, we'll get ready to go. All right, so the link is in the chat. I hope that you feel free to join us, share your experience with anxiety or panic attacks or anything like that, because we'd love to talk with you. So this year, tell me, guys, what were your thoughts about the election process?
Stressful.
A little more, I hope. Share a little bit more.
Oh no! So to me, it seems like it's okay. I'll start off where people forget we're in a pandemic, right? And I thought it was a good idea to do the mail-in ballots and everything. I hear everyone's opinions about it and everything, but I did my mail-in ballot, and of course, I got the email my vote was counted.
Okay.
But when it came to the debates, it was stressful. When it came to people jabbing at each other, it seemed like I just wanted to throw my TV out the window, just trash it. I unplugged all my TVs, to be honest. I was just sick of it. I didn't want to see it. Right. So I'll wait for YouTube to give me the highlights, and that's it.
I'm saying, I could have just literally just left them off. That's just real.
No, because even just seeing that little red dot, it just got on your nerves. It was a trigger. So I just had to unplug it and just stash it to the side, to the point where my mother is like, "Can I have your TV?" I'm like, "Sure, girl, take it. I don't need it. I don't want you." I've been so turned off for the past 4 years that even when this came up, I saw the importance of voting, but I just didn't want to hear, it was just making me angry. The foolishness that was said, the lies that were told, the ignorance, it was just so, like, you thought I wasn't on my meds. Even my mother was like, "Did you take your meds today?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And that's why I need to turn it off, because this is beyond the treatment I'm getting to be self-soothing or doing self-care. So I'm gonna leave it alone.
So let me highlight for everyone out there. I think what Amliv did in recognizing that she was anxious, but also making very real steps to manage that anxiety is something that we should commend. And you know what, y'all? It's okay to not watch the news. Just want to put that out there. But Natalia, how does you handle, what were the elections like for you?
I mean, some things that Emily said are very much along the lines of what I did, especially, so I've moved a couple of times this year. With that being said, so in the middle of the George Floyd and all those things, like, and especially when the pandemic and all the updates, I was like watching the news, and then I moved and I was like, you know what? I need to manage the level of things. So if I saw it on social media, or so I'd follow CNN and, you know, different news outlets on my social media platforms, but at the same time, I could control how much I chose to take in, because I was like, it's going to be too much. And not quite a family member, but kind of like a family member of mine, one of my uncles, we were texting back and forth that night. So he's like, hey, are you going to be up, you know, watching for the results? And I was like, no. And he's like, you're not? And he's like, so, but did you? And I was like, it's been a while since I've stayed up that late for that. And he's like, but didn't you stay up for like Barack? And I was like, that was different. I was like, I'm going to go to bed and I will find out. It was going to be too much for me. I was just like, I'll find out in the morning and I'll be okay with it. I'm in my home by myself anyway.
I was with you. I did the same thing.
I was like, why am I going to stay? For me, I was like, why am I going to stay up? And grant you, another part to that was I've been trying to work out consistently. So I was like, I'm going to stay up and it's going to be late. And then I'm going to struggle to get up out of bed to go work out. It's not going to win for me. I'll find out when I get up in the morning. For me, it's not going to be a difference. It'll be different if we were having a party and gathering, then yes, I'd be there. But I'm like, I'm going to find out. Plus, I figured all those mail-in ballots, I'm like, the chances of us really finding an answer that night, I was just like, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't. And I mean, grant you, clearly days later is when it was like, it's a definite.
Days later with a Z, not with an S.
And it's funny you even said that, because literally when my uncle and I were talking, I said the last time I stayed up really and truly that kind of late was when it was President Bush and oh gosh, why is his name? President Clinton's former VP.
Al Gore.
I'm sorry?
Al Gore.
Al Gore.
Yes, Al Gore were running. And, you know, we didn't know for a while who was going to win. So I was like, after that, I was like, I'm good. Tell me when I wake up in the morning, you know, and then we'll go from there. And to be honest, I really thought Trump was going to win too. So I was just like, I'll take my sleep.
So also, Amliv highlighted the avoidance and taking out, and you reiterated something that we talked about, which is stress and also managing your expectation. Here's a real thing, and there's a question that we have. Here's a real thing for me. I'm big on managing my expectations. And so it's hard to do this, but this is where we got to invoke the logical side of our brain, like as much as we can, really engage that reason. Because my thought is the moment that there were mail-in ballots, Natalia did the same thing you did. There's no way these are going to be counted. None whatsoever. So for that reason alone, I was more than comfortable going to sleep because it was just like this. We're not going to get a result anytime soon. Then the other information I had was that regardless of what the results were, whether he won or not, Trump was going to create some type of grandstand. And so for that alone, I had to manage how I would respond to whatever potential information. And I think that is something that I utilize all the time, managing my expectation, because sleep is way more important. But there's a question for us here, and I actually want to put it out to you guys, and I'll answer at the end. Any suggestions on interactions between two people with their own triggers?
The first thing that comes to me is boundaries.
Okay.
It's something that I've learned and I'm still learning to be able to say, hey, you know what? I know you really want to talk about this, but these things for me right now are completely off limits. Like, I will tell you if you're okay with it, I can tell you when I'm ready to talk about it. I understand if you're not. I really want you to be in the space with me, but if you can't, it's okay too. And for giving the opportunity for the other person to do the same, to say, hey, these things are just not something I'm ready to engage with. I'm ready to talk about. but I'm here, I'm here for other stuff. And if you're okay with me saying, hey, I'm not ready for that. For me recently with, like I said, there's been a lot of different things that I've gone through in the last year, and being able to say that to some of my friends, like, hey, I'm not ready to talk right now. Whereas I'd usually be the one to answer the phone, like, I'm not. If you text me, that might be fine, but also realize, whereas before I'd always be quick to answer the phone, now you might have to go, it might be 2 weeks. But there's some other friends who we've been able to find different ways to interact. Like, for instance, I have a friend who's like, hey, let's do this. How about we do Marco Polos? That way it's a recorded video. I can see you, make sure you're good. And we talk some things out, but you're not restrained to a particular time frame. So it's not like I'm calling you in this moment, you have to answer. You can choose to answer a day from today, or just say, hey, I'm not ready to talk about that. As well as, there's some friends who just understood and they were like, hey, I'll give you your space when you're ready to come out. I'm here. So that's what's worked for me. And like I said, there's still some friends who are like, this is really hard for me. I'd rather not talk to you right now, period. And that's it. So
I think those are wonderful answers. At Catherine Samuel said that's so hard to do with parents, though. So I think I want to address that. So, Amliv, but I want to hear your thought, though. Natalia, those are some great strategies.
Not only with boundaries, I agree with her. And was this the similar peers, or was this just parents? What was the question again?
Person, someone else mentioned parents, but the person just says any suggestion on interactions between two people with their own triggers. So.
Own traumas. Okay, so to me, what has helped me personally is to find a therapist, a good therapist.
Love that too.
Because sometimes you have to fire some to find the good ones, and a support group.
Sure.
And you have to find the right support group where you can call your people, your support system, who they could be people who've gone through the same thing, and they're on different levels of healing, that they can give you suggestions or just talk you off the ledge and talk to you and just encourage you. Because for me personally, I have two different groups, and I have a group chat with one. I should say three then. Have a group chat with one I can always, go on trips with and FaceTime them. And then another group, we just, during holidays, we'll check up on each other, kind of like the family. Because I realize my family, especially my parents, they've never experienced it. And I can't fault them for not knowing how to handle what I'm going through. So I have to be willing to accept that, okay, they can't help me. They love me, but they can't help me. Thank you for being honest. Now let me go find who I can go seek for that, for security and validation in what my feelings and thinking of this situation is that I need to handle,
So Amliv, you highlighted basically peer groups, support groups, having the right person to talk to in creating those boundaries. Natalia, you outlined everything from managing your own response time, becoming aware of what maybe works for both you and the other party, and your boundaries look like managing your space. I think those are great strategies. So that's fantastic. I'll add to at Catherine Samuel about the parents thing. Whoa. Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I have come to be very mindful of my upbringing was very unique, but I think the principles hold true. You're an adult, okay? What you choose to actually, and it has nothing to do with your adult. Let me say that you're a free thinking being. You can set your own boundaries. You can hold your own boundaries. I want to release those like Kat from the unnecessary anxiety around the consequence of those boundaries. Yes, your parents may not like it. That's okay. Because you're setting these boundaries for you. And that's so important to recognize, right? Like it's okay to say, hey, mom, and I'll be honest, the first time I did it, it did not feel too great. But you know what I did afterwards when I realized like, I'm okay, to be honest. Like you do these things and you're okay. It's okay to say, mom, I don't think right now is a good time to talk, right? Or here's another thing that's big. When you say these things, this is what happens to me. So add to the first question for SS, I think it's so very important for any individual to be conscious of their own triggers. And then that can't remain just with you. It's best to share that with your partner, right? To whoever is in the relationship with you. So to parents, hey, mom, dad, when you say this, honestly, it makes me feel XYZ. Your feelings, I say it all the time, it's so underrated, but it's so true. Your feelings are valid because they are yours. Period. Now, I'm not gonna get into if they're true or whatever, but they're valid. Like, they are valid because they are yours. So if saying something hurts you, then you have all power and right to say, when you say that, it hurts me, or it makes me feel less than, or it makes me feel like pressure to respond to you when I am not ready to do so. And because of that, I am going to choose to do X, Y, Z. Healthy persons will say, oh, I am sorry, I did not know that. How can we find whatever method? And so I think that is so important for managing triggers between people. You got to be transparent about what you're feeling, what you're dealing with, and what's going on with you, and share that with the other person, and find ways to help you both navigate that tricky space. And I think it's so important. So we have about 2 minutes, and I want to leave basically split that time between you all before we wrap up, just to share maybe a closing thought, or just something maybe that stuck with you for this conversation you want to share with others before we wrap up. So Natalia or Emily, the floor is yours.
To be honest, I think what you said about managing expectations when we were talking about the election is something quite pivotal. And even with dealing with our anxiety, whether it's goals we're trying to reach or we're not where we want to be or whatever it is, when we're able to slowly manage that, it makes a difference. Now, I'm not saying this like I have it together, because promise you, I literally have a huge thing in my life that I haven't been able to tackle. But yet again, it seems to be everything that I'm reading, everything that I'm working with, come back to breaking those things down into small,
Absolutely.
achievable goals. Then I'm able to accomplish it. Because when I think of this huge thing, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
But when I break it down into smaller, and for me right now, it's like, okay, I'm trying to exercise. And if I think about, oh, my goal is to be as continuous as possible, it's just like, no.
One
But if
day.
I go, you know what, tomorrow morning, and I don't think about the rest of the week, just tomorrow, just this morning, I'm up. Can I get up? Can I go and come back? Then okay, that's it. And we'll deal with tomorrow when it comes. So
Absolutely. So wonderful. Wow. Emily, if you, it's a great thought.
For me, it's I really love the boundaries portion and the nap times. They're very important. You have to make a commitment. Right, right. So you have to make a commitment to yourself, not to be a people pleaser, but to check in with yourself. I like that. Natalia talked about being aware, having that awareness about yourself, to basically know when to let people know, hey, I'm not ready for that right now.
Yeah.
I need to step back. Or I tell my family, look, nap time. They already know what that word means. So I could be in the room on my phone for hours pretending to take a nap, but then eventually take a quick nap, I wake up refreshed, I'm good. They don't need to know what I'm doing during nap time, but it's essential. So yeah, just make a commitment to yourself that you're willing to, find what's triggering you when it comes to anxiety and seek the help that you need. If setting boundaries and having that nap time period for yourself isn't working.
I want to thank you both for being a part of this conversation. The time has absolutely flown by, and I appreciate you both being transparent. Emily, again, you have been a staple, not only for the series, but for F.L.O.W. And Natalia, you are more than welcome to come back. This is a space for young adults. We are unapologetic with our experiences and how they impact us, and we're not afraid to incorporate Christ in that. So this is the point of the show where I say, like, what's the connection, right? Like, how does this connect to anything spiritually? And the reality is, here's the first thing, right? In Hebrews, it says that the only thing, the only thing that has remained the same, right, yesterday, today, and forever is Christ. Don't try to, one, time travel, because you can't. You don't have that ability. You are not omnipresent, right? Or whatever the word would be for time.
Mhm.
But also, like, change happens. The only thing that's consistent is Christ. If you become accustomed to the reality that change is going to occur in your life, you can better prepare yourself for that reality. It won't be easy, but it definitely will be necessary. And do you know what else is important for us to remember? That Christ has a peace that he wants to give to us, like a peace that surpasses understanding. And why that's significant is because there are going to be things that occur in our life that will be beyond our understanding, that will be beyond our ability to comprehend the what ifs of the world. And sometimes it's okay to let that go to God, right? Lord, I actually need that specific piece to help me in this moment because I do not understand. And I always find that so powerful that it's a piece that surpasses understanding. Like, it doesn't make sense because there's a lot of things that go on in this world that doesn't make sense. And the scripture goes deeper to say, like, it's meant to guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. And I want to leave it with this for those out there suffering with anxiety, which is the scripture in Peter, and it says, "Cast your cares upon him, cast all your anxieties upon him, because he cares for you." And I want to be very clear. I am not going to sound like a cliche religious person. I believe that to be wholly true, but it's also important that you seek out other persons who you can share your cares with, because there are people that care for you. As a therapist, my job for the length of time that we're in therapy is for me to care for you. It's a helping profession. And I think true helping professions are rooted in people who care for you. All right. And it doesn't have to be, this intimate sexual care. No, it's care for you as a human being who deserves a right to experience life unencumbered by mental strain and fatigue. So please feel free to cast your cares upon the Lord. Seek out a therapist, seek out help, because you know what? We're all triggered at times and we all need that support. So I want to thank you all for joining another F.L.O.W Presents. We have one more episode for our Triggered series. We'll be talking about depression and really moving us into an action space. What does getting help look like? Who can I get help? What is the best way to approach therapy? So we're going to kind of just bottle that all up together to encapsulate the series, because we want to make sure that people feel encouraged to move to action. So please like, subscribe, and share this with others. Go back and watch it. Let somebody know that we just had a conversation about what it means to be triggered. So thank you, everybody. Love it. Amliv and Natalia, please just hold off with us. We want to, thank you afterwards. So to everyone else, peace.